Hello, 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 and welcome back to Kerbal Space Programming. Kevin here, and today it has come to the Kerbal's attention that they have not been able to go to space for a very long time, and they're very frustrated about this. And we are equally frustrated because it has meant that there's a whole bunch of science that could be gotten by actually sending these Kerbals out to, say, the moon or to Minimus that we are kind of lacking because we have not actually recovered any return vehicles, so we've been relying entirely on transmission science. But to rectify that, Bob Kerman has been selected to run a low-power craft, and I'm going to turn the lights on real quick because we are still attached to the launch clamps, and come on, let me see the top of, come on, there we go. Okay, good. Panning. But yes, so we have unlocked I think it's the space exploration node of the tech tree, and this gives us these ladders, and it also gives us this pressmet barometer, which is awesome. There's also note that I have installed TAC life support, which means that we actually need to provide food and oxygen and water for the Kerbals when they are in space. Hasn't really come into play, added it a few episodes back, but yes. So the idea here is that we're going to send this craft around to orbit the moon, and it's probably a little overspec for that, but that's okay. We want to make sure that we have a fair margin since this is a manned vehicle. We've got lights, and we've got batteries and that sort of thing. We've got some solar panels, and the idea is that Bob is going to go ahead and run all of these experiments and collect the data as many times as possible before returning so that we can get as much science as we possibly can. One of the things that's been limiting is that the range of these communication antennas doesn't really extend out beyond the sphere of influence of the Kerbal system. So we need to actually unlock longer range dish antennas if we want to start sending probes to interplanetary space. So let's go ahead and, we'll go ahead and log the pressure data real quick. There we go. All right, collected and recorded atmospheric pressure. That's 3.6 science. That's new. And the rest of this is all pretty, I think we've kind of maxed out all of this if we look at the materials bay. Oh, okay, 0.4. And yes, all of the other experiments are things that we've used in the past. But yes, let's go ahead and pop Bob out and just hope that he doesn't go. Oh, okay. At the expense of the camera, that's fine. Okay, great, good job. But the idea is that all of these experiments are within reach while Bob is on the ladder. So we can go ahead and take the data there. And if we make our way down carefully, there's a little bit of a gap here, but he should be okay. And we could collect the data from here and then restore. And we can also just barely reach these mystery goo containment units, which we will go ahead and use once we get into the range of the moon. And yes, the whole idea is that we're going to run this in kind of separate script. We're going to run a couple of separate scripts, but Bob will be in charge of forcing open the various antenna when he is ready to go, and then we'll know that it's time for us to upload some new instructions to the craft. We'll go ahead and force close that. Alrighty, but with the piddly amount of science that we've managed to get from the launch pad, let's see if can we do a crew report? No, okay. Yes, we have woefully extended ourselves, and actually I wonder, since we're technically landed, can he do an EVA? Well, he can do an EVA, but he can't get a surface sample. Sometimes that works with the smaller craft. But okay, so nothing to see here. We'll go ahead and hop in and turn off the lights, and we're going to go ahead and just use the same launch script that we have done for all of kind of the previous missions with this setup. I'm going to go ahead and queue that up, and we will be good to go to space. Okay, well, we're back. This is a bit embarrassing. I transmitted the instruction and the thing just sat there, and I wasn't entirely sure why. I kept on trying to figure out why it didn't seem to do things, and finally I realized that it doesn't actually have a connection. So I've gone ahead and actually modified this. Now the reason, we do have a very short range, this dipole antenna, which is active and should be able to get a connection to the KSC. But the thing about remote tech is you also need something that is capable of processing that signal. And this command pod cannot do that. So while we were able to get a signal, we weren't able to actually decode it. So I've gone ahead and updated our craft a tiny little bit. And let me see, let me zoom in something. Yes, okay, there we go. I've updated our craft a tiny little bit. We've basically moved the mystery goo inside here, and there's a little probe core inside that is capable of doing the remote command processing. We've also moved the batteries inside, and I've added on a few extra just for good measure, but now this will actually have a connection. So what was happening is then we were checking whether our remote tech add-on had a connection with the ship, and it was saying no, it didn't. But now it does, so we know that this thing is good to go. Let's go ahead and jump out and get our science again. Okay, and the camera's going to do its weird thing again. There we go. That's better. Let's... Wait a second. Are you... Yes, good. You are Bob. Okay. And let's log our pressure data again. Get that science. Good, good, good. And hope that we can mine to the gap. Let's double check and make sure that we can... Yes, okay. So we can observe the mystery goo. It's not going to give us anything, but that's fine. It does mean that we are in range, so if we were to save that, we can reset the goo canister. So everything that we need to have access to is in range from here. So we'll observe the mystery or the materials bay and grab that tiny, tiny amount of science and restore that. Let's see. Collect the data. Yes. And restore. And we will hop back into our ship and hope that this time we are able to actually take off. Okay, so let's, now that we have a connection, now I did, for debugging purposes, I did kill our boot script, because that's what it was doing, is it was constantly waiting for a connection to see if it had an update script. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot, and then I will upload the script surreptitiously on a different machine, and we can let this thing get underway, I hope. Okay, well, there is a 10-second, there we go. Okay, beginning our launch script. Bob, it is up to you now. Now we are going to keep an eye on this. Oh, we should turn off the lights, actually. So we do not have much in the way of power. I am going to go ahead and grab the press map barometer, log the pressure data while we're up here. And we are... Okay. We are tilting over significantly. And this is a little worrisome. But okay, we collected and recorded atmospheric pressure data from the surroundings. I did not set up an abort command. We should probably make sure to do that in the future, but it looks like, yeah, this thing is very unbalanced, which is problematic, and yeah, we are losing control. Okay, what could be pulling it in this direction? It's not is the mystery goo that different? I mean, the pressure, these should all be physics-less for the most part, so they shouldn't have a huge impact. Though it does look like we are sort of correcting, maybe a little bit. I do not know if we shall go to space today. It is valiantly trying to pull up, but yeah, it looked like right at the beginning. I wonder if it could be that there was just a little bit of wobble on that initial mission. I think, though, that we will allow... yeah, because I should have set up an abort script. We will allow Bob to survive this if this thing turns out not to be able to make it to space. And man, it just cannot pull up. And I think part of that is I don't think that this thing actually has the requisite thrust to weight ratio at the time that it needs. Okay. Yep, and we are pointed toward the ground, going very fast. I think it is time for Bob to get in here and decouple this. And we'll see. Okay, we survived that. That whole thing is going to be... We'll keep an eye on the parachute. Well, yeah, we'll let him manually at least try and survive this, because this wasn't really his fault. Oh boy. Okay, so this is a comedy of errors today. It is... Okay, it's risky to deploy the parachute, but we'll go ahead and let Bob manage that. I think in the... Well, yeah, so what I should have done is actually tweaked this minimum pressure and then set both the decoupler and... Okay, now we're safe. Let's deploy the chute. And I guess, can we get some... Let's log the temperature, see if we... Oh, look! We got some data that way. Alright. And okay, we've got nothing there. Do a crew report? Nothing. Okay. Yes, so on future missions, we should make sure that we always have an abort script. Thankfully, he does have plenty of supplies. I think this is enough to last him. Actually, we can take a look here in life support monitoring. Okay, yes, so he could survive for 34 days without rescue. Good for him. But we have lost a significant amount of funds. trying to put this big hefty thing into space, and we are still coming down pretty quickly. I'm not excited about that. I'm wondering if maybe is the antenna very massive or something? Dish range? Nah, it doesn't tell me. Okay. And of course, since all of the antenna, and we don't have any signal processing, so who knows what... Actually, I don't even know what's going on here. Okay, it's not giving us any information. That's fine, I guess. Okay. Bob, are you gonna... okay. Well, we do have a heat shield, so that should at least protect us against the rigors of the atmosphere. All right. And we're getting... Okay, don't die. Oh, boy. Okay, that was violent, but strangely satisfying. All right, let's... can we do a crew report now? Okay, nothing from the water. That's fine. I mean, as long as we're here, as long as we survived, we can take a moment to appreciate what we've been through. We'll take the data, and then we'll log the pressure data again, and take that. And can we do another... Let's take that, and then... Okay, so we got some stuff from the water. It's not entirely wasted. Let's see, can we get a... Let's take a surface sample. It should be slightly watery. There we go. All right, 9 science. And actually, I think if we store that, and then we can probably take another one, take a surface sample? Yes, okay, because you see the green bar is not full, so we can actually take 2 samples and get a little bit more science out of it, and do another EVA. Well, no, I think that one's not going to matter much, but okay, let's go ahead and recover you. I'm sorry, Bob. That was not what we had planned. All right, so 11 science from that, and okay, so there's some debris over there. No reputation for you. Can we see that? You made it that far. The moon is that way, but you ended up over there. So let's go ahead and recover this. All right, 30 science. That is, okay, that's something. Actually, I wonder if we can unlock. Is there something? These are all... Okay, these are all 90, but we could at least unlock the first step of aviation. Why not, since we got kind of the free science for it? All right, I'm going to go ahead and try and redesign our craft so that it doesn't do that again, and we will be back. Okay, so after an embarrassingly large number of failures, I pretty much have gone through and redesigned this craft from the ground up. You can see we've gotten rid of these solid rocket boosters because ultimately I figured, that this thing was ultimately too tall and that there was too much wobble, and that when we were trying to go very fast, a little bit of wobble exacerbated itself very quickly. So we're hopping out of the craft. We're going to go down and collect the little bits of science that we can while we're still on the launch pad. We're going to rely on liquid fuel boosters this time. And yeah, so this is now the Moonsea craft number 3. I did go through and I tried changing, adding more struts for the probe, which we've now put on the top of the craft. I went through and tried changing the wings, or not the wings, but the fins, and try and give them more control just to try and avoid any problems, but ultimately we kept on deviating by a significant amount. But this craft does seem to work. I did fly it manually and discovered that it did have enough juice to get us into orbit, and actually on paper it has about the same amount of delta V as the previous one, which is kind of embarrassing because this is much smaller and uses only those 2 boosters. Now we do have fuel lines going from those outside boosters, so that they should be the only ones that drain, so that by the time they fall off, of course we're doing some science as we go through, well, at least try. I'm gonna be tracking all this stuff just because I'm not sure whether we've got low science or high science for all of these instruments, but yes, as those side boosters fall off, we will end up with a full tank in the main stage. The main stage does have thrust vectoring, which means it can steer, but the side boosters do not. But yes, we are making our way up, and because we've gotten rid of the boosters, we can actually go back to a reasonable gravity turn. Remember, when we had the boosters, because it was going so fast, if we tried to deviate much from up until we got much higher in the atmosphere, ultimately would be going too fast, would kind of pancake against the atmosphere, and it would get us all spun out. But this one does manage to make it into space with a reasonable margin. So let's jump over real quick and take a look at the script that we use to launch this thing. Alrighty, so here we are in our Moon-C launch script, and the nice thing is that because we're not using those solid rocket boosters, we can actually do a bit of a gravity turn this way. And this was just a matter of me kind of going through and tweaking our ascent profile. This is something that we wrote, I think, way back in episode 4, but basically the idea is that we specify an altitude, we specify an angle off of the horizon that we want at that altitude, and then we specify the thrust that we want at that altitude. And it turns out that we can just go ahead and stay at max thrust. We never hit the point where we start to, really pummel against the atmosphere. So we start off going straight up. When we're 500 meters off, we'll tilt over to 80 degrees, and then we just gradually, in increments, get ourselves over until we're finally pointed toward the horizon at 60, and then once we hit 70, we'll go ahead and thrust all the way down. And yeah, I love how simple this is in contrast with the solid rocket booster stuff. So that's just setting up that variable that describes what our ascent profile should look like. We'll notify that we're going to execute the ascent, lock the throttle up, wait a second and stage, and then we've got that function that we get from our ascent library, execute ascent profile, and we pass it 90 degrees because we want to be going east, and then we pass it that profile. Now, I think that we'll probably go through and revise this a little bit because, our existing libraries are all kind of prefixed, like the maneuver stuff is all maneuver underscore something, but anyway, because this was I think the first library that we ended up writing. So anyway, once that is done, we've finished our ascent profile. We'll wait until we're close to apoapsis, and we'll lock the throttle to 1. And now we're going to wait until our periapsis is almost out of the atmosphere. And if it happens that we burn out during that time, that's great. Otherwise, don't worry about it. We're going to throttle down to 0. And now this is a little bit of a hack because we want to make sure that we don't leave the remainder of our ascent stage in orbit. We want to make sure that we discard it while it will still end up hitting the atmosphere. So we say if ship liquid fuel is greater than 270, because we know that our orbital stage has 270 units of fuel. So if we have more than that, well, that means that we still have a stage attached. So if that's the case, we'll go ahead and stage and wait a second. Then we'll throttle all the way up and wait until our periapsis is outside of the atmosphere. Throttle down and we'll say, okay, we're done. So let's check in on our craft. And there we are, just starting our circularization. We've gotten up to our apoapsis, and we are starting that burn, letting the remainder of the main stage use as much fuel as possibly can. The idea, hopefully, is that we'll be able to kind of reuse this for all light-ish craft, because this has, a fair fitting of science instruments, so theoretically we could also have this manage a lander. It'd be interesting to kind of go through and test this vehicle with different types of payloads and try and figure out, well, what's the maximum that we can really eke out of this while getting us into a reasonable parking orbit before transferring to something else. But yes, we see the orbital velocity is creeping up. We're just waiting for this to go ahead and finish its circularization, and then, there we go. And ditch that, and then, okay, finished off our R70. So the booster or the main stage should fall back to the planet. Unfortunately, it's not tracking, but our orbit is stable, which means that we will be able to transfer ourselves over to the moon, which is fantastic. And now, of course, it is time for us to get whatever remaining science we can have. So let's go ahead and see if we can do a crew. Oh, nope, we've got crew report from before. So we'll turn on the lights and let Bob get out and collect the data from there, and go through and start collecting all of the stuff that we gathered while we were in the atmosphere, because while I was explaining the code, I was also going through and trying to get as much of this as possible. Obviously, the pressomat barometer is not going to give us much information, but it still gives us science. That was something that was modified recently. I think in the last version they updated it so that even when you're in a vacuum, the pressomat barometer is somehow still valuable. Or, valid, I don't know. But yeah, so grab all of the science. Come on. Reset. Yep, gather, restore, restore. And of course, some of these, most of these, aside from the press mat, we have gotten some of the science already from previous missions, but because we never recovered it, we transmitted it, we only got a percentage of what we were looking for in the past. So, there we go. We can recover a small bit more science, and by actually taking that data and putting it in the capsule, we can return it to Kerbal, where it will have much more value. And the last thing that we are going to do, quite obviously, we can't survive out here very long without electricity, so we're going to let Bob go ahead and extend the solar arrays, or the solar panels, I guess. Yes. And there we go. Just get yourself around. I suppose we could have decked this out with ladders all the way down, but that felt like it would be a little bit of overkill. But yes, now that we have TAC life support, we do actually have to be mindful of electricity, because if we run out of electricity, then there's no heating, and Bill could potentially freeze to death. Now, when we had Valentina up here on, one of our very, very early missions, we kind of ignored that and let it go. Part of that is just because without solar panels and without batteries, it is very, very, very difficult to survive long in space. And so trying to run with TAC life support at the early stage is an incredibly difficult challenge, and certainly we would have run out of electricity for managing anything else. But there we go. We've got a whole bunch of science, and we are ready to go to the moon and collect even more. We've got our capsules stockpiled with as much, and we can watch the sunrise over Kerbal. And yes, we will be transferring ourselves over to the moon and collecting as much data from there as we possibly can so that we can unlock further and further technologies. But because I'm trying to keep these somewhat short, and because we had several disasters in this episode, I will have to leave it there and see you all in the next episode. So I will hope to see you then. Cheers.